So I would really like to welcome Sarah Benenson Goldberg today, class of '88, who is going to talk about increasing your confidence and career success with powerful communication. Sarah, in combining her executive leadership skills, sales experience, and executive coaching experience, offers a unique blend of training and development for leaders, managers, teams, organizations, and individuals. She worked at the Walt Disney Company for almost a decade and then founded her own advertising sales firm. Then from that, she went on to get some certificates in coaching and has set up a coaching practice where she has expertise in life transitions, executive development. Sarah helps her clients gain clarity, increase confidence, improve communication skills, and identify clear paths for moving forward. She's certified by the Coaches Training Institute and as a Myers-Briggs facilitator. Sarah lives in Northern California with her husband, who happens to be another Brown grad that she met her freshman year in Perkins. They have two daughters who are 12 and 14 years old. So, Sarah, I thank you for being with us today, and I know we're all looking forward to having your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So good morning to some of you. I think it's afternoon for others. Today, as Heather said, we're going to be talking about powerful communication. What is it? And even more importantly, how do you become a powerful communicator? And then we're going to take the learning from today and your understanding of personal empowerment and apply it to the interviewing process. According to Heather, there have been a lot of requests to help people improve and feel more comfortable with the interviewing process. So we hope to do that for you today. And we'll conclude just with some top 10 interviewing tips. So what is powerful communication? Probably most of you have a sense, a bit of an instinct of what it is, but maybe you just don't have the tools and the things to help you dig deep and really reach your fullest potential. So again, that's what we hope to do today. So Heather, let's send out a chat and ask people, what attributes and qualities do you think make a powerful communicator? And just envision somebody who's inspired you or persuaded you, somebody you admire, and send us a couple of those thoughts.
Okay, Sarah, I've sent that out, and already people are quickly throwing in some responses. And when you and I were talking about this the other day, I started trying to picture myself, you know, great speakers, great communicators, and of course Ruth Simmons came to mind. I had heard it, and then she came and spoke to our staff, and I was just overwhelmed by her ability to make us all feel special. Oh, wow, I can't even read them coming at the best. We had confidence, we have ability to truly listen, emotion, eye contact, speaks with conviction, intelligence, humor, passion. Let's see, what else do I have?
Great.
Frequent updates, conviction.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's really no right or wrong answer, and all of these are wonderful qualities, and they're the qualities that work for you. They're very diverse, obviously. So what we want to talk about today is how do you bring those qualities, the ones that you admire most, to your communication skills. So thanks for that input, everyone. So what is powerful communication? Powerful communication is essentially just an effective conversation. And an effective conversation is always clear to your listener. It's delivered with purpose, and it's spoken with confidence. So think of all of your relationships. Essentially, they are built one conversation at a time. So whether it's a personal relationship or professional relationship, I really see conversation as the building blocks of the relationship. And while you probably don't imagine that any one conversation is going to drastically change the trajectory of your career, your life, or a relationship, the reality is any conversation can. I read a great book that some of you may want to pick up called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. And I'm going to read you a quote from the book. She says, quote, "Every conversation we have with our coworkers, boss, employees, or significant others either enhances those relationships, flatlines them, or takes them down." So with that thought in mind, powerful communication really is fundamental to your success at work and in life. And an effective and successful communicator has what I call the 3 C's. The 3 C's empower you to be a powerful communicator. So we're going to delve into the 3 C's. Clarity, confidence, and commitment. Clarity of purpose. The more clear you are, the greater clarity you have, the more confident you become. And with clarity and confidence gives you the ability to really stay committed to your purpose rather than your emotions. What happens often is that our emotions take over, our thinking, our feelings, and our behavior, and we lose sight of our purpose. So if you remember one thing today, and I want you to remember a lot, but if you can only remember one thing, clarity. Clarity is one of the most significant pieces to powerful communication. It leads to the confidence. So how do you get clear? You want to be aware of your purpose. You want to know what your purpose is for engaging in that conversation or that meeting. So remember I said at the very beginning that an effective conversation is clear to your listener. Well, it's got to be clear to you first. So often communication ends up being miscommunication. And it's because your listener doesn't know what you mean, doesn't get your point. So you have to be really, really clear on your point. So I usually have people run through 4 basic questions. Literally ask yourself, what is my purpose for this meeting or conversation? Ask yourself, what do I want this listener to get from this conversation? What am I expecting from my listener? And always check to see if that's really a reality, what you're expecting. Check in with yourself. And my goal is. So while these may seem fairly basic, they are. The fact is, so many of us just don't have that level of consciousness when we engage in a conversation or enter a meeting. And if we're put on the spot, we really couldn't answer these questions. So I want to give you a real life story and how this works. Belinda was very frustrated with her salesperson. Wasn't meeting quota, and the salesperson worked from home, which is probably pretty common for a lot of you these days. Oh, are we okay? So, all right. So she has a salesperson who works from home. And as I was starting to say, it's probably very common for many of you, so you might be able to relate to this. And Belinda was coming to the conclusion that the only way she could help her salesperson become, a stronger individual and meet her quota was to have her work from the office 50% of the time. So when Belinda was asked, do you want your salesperson to quit? Are you okay if she quits? And Belinda said, no, of course not. I want to help her, and I want her to reach her full potential. And what was happening to Belinda is that her emotions were driving her frustration and her anger, and she was having a quick response. When she was able to step back and go through this clarity process, what she recognized was that her purpose was really to learn what needed to be fixed and to help support this salesperson to succeed. She asked herself, what does the listener get from this conversation? She really wanted her listener to feel supported, to be inspired, and to mostly know her management was there to help. Belinda was expecting that her salesperson would be truthful and absolutely show a desire to stay at the company and a willingness to learn. And she was able to identify her goal, which was, let's figure out what the problems are and come up with a game plan. So these are questions that I use. I'd love to hear a couple of questions that come to mind for you that you might use in order to get clarity. Can we send out a chat, Heather?
Sure. So think about, what questions do you use?
So what essentially happened with Belinda is that she had no information. She hadn't talked to her salesperson. She hadn't even talked to herself. And she was coming to a decision that was driven purely by her emotions. So going through this exercise, this conscious exercise of clarifying her purpose, allowed her to step back and enter into the conversation that came a few days later and have a very effective conversation. And what happened was they both walked out of the meeting, Belinda feeling she accomplished exactly what she wanted, and the salesperson felt supported. And in fact, the salesperson did agree to work out of the office one day a week. So what are some of the questions coming in that people use to gain clarity?
Yeah, I love that story. I think it really helps, gives some ideas, and it's a lot of great questions too here. Anticipating objections. Should anyone else be involved? There was a couple of, sorry, there's so many coming in. It's taking me a minute to take back. What are the next steps? Action items. What behavior do I want to have changed? Thinking, is that my goal? That's a good one to know. Do I really want someone to change their behavior? Can you tell me what I'm asking you? So testing it out and seeing if your point is clear. That's good. What points are going to be difficult for me to communicate? Single most important point. What is my goal?
Yeah. Great. These are all great questions, and the point is to come up with your own checklist. That clarity leads to confidence, and the point is so that you have a clear picture of your purpose and your goals, that you enter a meeting or conversation with confidence. The clearer you are, the more confident you become. So focus on what you know for sure. Hopefully that's your purpose. Be able to state your purpose to your listener. Remember, at the heart of most communication is miscommunication, and it's because your listener doesn't get what you're saying. So if you're able to articulate, as Belinda did, that the purpose of this meeting is for us together to figure out what's going on and for me to support you in creating those changes and moving forward. State your expectations. Belinda was able to say to her employee, I really expect to see your enthusiasm for staying with this company. I really want to know that you want it, and I want you to be truthful. So again, the clarity made Belinda more confident and far more effective in her conversation. In order to act confident, you really need to think it. Think it, feel it, and act it. The reality is that everything starts with a thought. If you think empowering things, you feel empowered, you act empowered. If you have disempowering thoughts, of course the opposite happens. You feel disempowered, you act disempowered. And really where most people make the fundamental mistake is they hang on to the old thoughts, not even completely aware that they're doing so. And then they say, I'm going to act confident. Just act confident in this meeting. But the reality is our bodies really read what our minds tell us, and whether it's through your tone of voice, your body language, even the vibes you give off, your thinking comes through in your feelings and your behavior. So I'm going to give you another example. Elise was vice president of a technology group. She very smart, very calm, really soft, lovely demeanor. And she had two individuals on her team who were pretty much the opposite. High energy, very outspoken. And every time Elise entered a meeting with them, she was in a defensive mode, ready to stand up and support her point. She felt like she was always entering into sort of a verbal argument or a verbal, I need to win attitude. And what she came to realize was that she had to prep more for her meetings and go through these kinds of exercises of asking herself what's her purpose, to get clear on her purpose so she could walk into a meeting and communicate exactly what she wanted to happen, exactly what she wanted to get across, and she would feel more confident. So in fact, she said that her prep time was as important as her meeting time, which is interesting because for some people, your prep time is going to take longer. So Elise had a recent meeting, and in fact, the purpose, as she went through the exercise, she clearly defined the purpose as making an announcement. It was about a new tech system that was being implemented in the company. And she was very clear on what she wanted her listeners to get out of it, which is that this is a corporate decision, it's been made, and here's the start date. she was able to articulate to her people that her expectation was that you will ask questions, please only relating to your piece of the implementation process. So what happened was she walks into the meeting, she's thinking about her purpose, she's feeling more confident, and she's acting more confident. So she was able, for one of the first times, to actually keep the meeting, on time, on task. Oops, my screen just went blank. Uh-oh, Heather, there we go. Sorry, my screen just went blank. So she was able to really keep the meeting in the, defined time and get her purpose across. And in fact, she walked out, again, feeling like she had accomplished exactly what she wanted to accomplish. Now, I want to point out one thing, which is that sometimes you don't have time to prep. And you're called into a meeting or somebody stops you and engages in a conversation, you can still use these tools and this awareness to lead yourself to a place of confidence and certainty. You want to focus on what you know for sure. So say somebody, addresses you about some project you're working on and you're not completed. Rather than trying to, fumble and give them whatever answer you think they might want, focus on what you know for sure. If you know for sure that you need more time, articulate that. Articulate, I need more time. If somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, hey, you know what? I can answer the first part of that, but let me send you over to Susie Q, and she'll answer the other part. You want to take your thoughts and focus on what you know for sure, because that is where your clarity comes from. And again, if you start letting your emotions take over, you're all nervous that you haven't finished the project, you're going to feel disempowered and you're going to act disempowered. So once you have clarity on purpose, clarity of expectations, you've recognized that you need to show up with confidence, thinking, feeling, and acting confident. You want to make a commitment to yourself. You want to stay the course. And staying the course is really making a verbal commitment to hold your purpose higher than your emotions. So what I mean by that is if you are clear on your purpose, you will be able to shift your thinking to a very objective focus, which is your purpose, rather than having your emotions take over. Make sure you get familiar with your emotional triggers. For example, Elisa's trigger was literally these two people being in the meeting. As soon as she knew they were in the meeting, her emotions took over. She felt nervous, she felt frustrated, she felt defensive. You might have your own triggers. It might be somebody pointing a finger or a certain tone of voice. It might be when you have to sit on a boss's other side of the desk. Start to get to know your emotional triggers. And then come up with a signal for yourself. When you feel yourself shifting out of confidence, which it's going to happen in the middle of the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, you might start feeling insecure. How do you get yourself back to being confident? You want to recognize how it feels. And you want to have a signal for yourself. So some of the things that people have told me, they sit back in their chair, they take a deep breath, a quiet deep breath, of course. They might shift their body weight. I even had somebody who would touch his watch wristband, and that was kind of his signal to himself. And that signal is your moment of consciousness, your moment to really say, do I want to go down the same path of getting insecure and fumbling, or do I want to shift back to a place of confidence?
Hey, Sarah, you've given us a couple of good examples with Belinda and Elise. I'm wondering if you might have an example of someone from the other side, say a staff person who has to present something difficult or is having some misunderstandings with a manager.
Okay, yeah, sure. Of course that comes up. There was a situation, we'll call him David, and none of these names are real. So anyway, so David, he was supposedly miserable in his job, and his first thought was to get out of the job. With a little support, professional support, and some coaching, he was able to recognize that he actually liked the company and the people. What was happening to him is he was not using his skills and his strengths. So he was sort of swimming upstream rather than with the current of who he is. And his initial thought was to go into his boss and kind of complain, just say, I'm not happy, this isn't working for me. And what he was able to do with a level of consciousness was approach his boss with a very clear purpose. And his purpose was to articulate what he's good at and how the company could benefit. He actually had two positions in mind. One was an existing one, and the other one he wanted to create. So when he went to talk to his boss, he was very, very focused on the purpose of achieving a goal, which is, I want a different position in this company. I want you to get the greatest benefits out of my skills. So does that help, Heather?
Yeah, that's a great way of showing the other side. I really appreciate that. I have another question that's come in, and it's a question that you and I had talked a little bit about in terms of, how it's hard to maintain the confidence and what it means by insecurity. And the listener asked, what do you mean by emotions interfering, getting insecure? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so what happens is you have a physical emotional response when you shift from confidence to insecurity. And the best thing you can do is start noticing how you as an individual feel when you're insecure. So what I mean by that is some people have a drop in their stomach, they start to clench their teeth, they, put their hands in a fist. Some people have rapid heart rate. Some people just start talking quickly to fill the nervous space. Some people clam up. You want to notice your personal physical response to insecurity. And a good way to do that is to just think about a situation that made you feel insecure and recognize where in your body the insecurity shows up. Because if you can recognize the physical response to insecurity, that is your signal to yourself that you've moved. You've moved from confidence to insecurity. And that's when you get to sit up straight in your chair or touch your watch band or take a deep breath, whatever it is, for you to signal yourself that you have the choice. Do I stay down this path of insecurity or do I shift to a place of confidence? You have the choice. Okay? Hope that
Great.
helps.
We'll have a couple of questions about interviewing, but I think that's where you're going. So
it is.
We'll come back to questions at the end, okay?
Yeah. So once you've mastered the 3 C's, those pieces that give you your personal empowerment, how do you take that personal empowerment and apply it to the interviewing process? There are 3 pieces, 3 tools really that I'd like to share with you today. And one of them, of course, is clarity. The other is reframing, and the other is acknowledging. And we're going to go through each of these that you can do on your own. So, of course, clarity leads to confidence. You want to be clear. You want to be clear first on the organization's missions and objectives, goals, significant past events, future plans, culture. The biggest pet peeve organizations have is that people walk in and they are not clear on the organization. So significant past events is something a lot of people don't really look into. I advise that you do. Have they had a big donation if it's a nonprofit organization? Do they have a new leader? Have they sold off a piece of the company? Have they bought a new company? Gives you a lot of insight into the company. And try to get to know their future plans. You can read articles. And the culture. If you know anybody inside the company, that's a great way to understand the culture. So make sure you're clear on the organization's key elements. And the area that is often most difficult for people is just getting clear on their unique qualities and strengths, both personality-based strengths and skill-based strengths. We think we know, but the reality is if we had to sit down and make a list, it actually would be kind of tough. It would be even tougher to articulate those skills if we hadn't made the list. So the first step in how do you get clear on your strengths, of course, is to write that list. But brainstorm. To go through brainstorming, you have to exercise your brain. You have to take your brain to places that you don't go on a regular basis. And one of the things that prevents us from stretching our brain is that sabotaging voice that says, oh, no, that's not a strength. Your boss told you that 2 years ago. Oh, no, you didn't do well in school. If your gut tells you you're good at something, it's a strength, it's a quality you're proud of, write it down. Ignore that voice. And even more so, explore your out-of-work accomplishments, volunteering, clubs, even life experiences. I worked with somebody who traveled a lot as a kid. His dad was in the military, and he was constantly making new friends, constantly adjusting to a different life in a different world. And he recognized that one of his greatest strengths is adaptability, his ability to adjust to change. So, in fact, he recognized the entrepreneurial environment is a great one for him because it's always changing. People are coming and going. And it's really nice for you to recognize how your life experiences have contributed to your skills and your strengths. And of course, ask your family and friends. They know you really well. Start making that list as big and wide as you can. After your brainstorming, you want to give depth and add context. And we're going to go through some examples in a moment. You want to be specific to you. How do you make your strengths unique and specific to you? After step 2, we will also touch on step 3. How do you turn your weaknesses into strengths? But let's focus on step 2. Let's say one of your strengths is that you're a good communicator. What does that really mean? You know, a good communicator to me is probably very different than a good communicator to you. And the fact is, if I lined up 10 people and asked them what makes a good communicator, everybody would have different pieces of information. So how do you add depth and context? Well, Andrew, who defines himself as a good communicator, started to talk out loud. Okay, he started to explain how he travels to all these different national markets, he speaks to large groups, that the difficult thing is that he's communicating vision and change, and so many people are resistant to change, that he has really found he's become an excellent persuasive communicator. He said one of his greatest skills was that he has this just wonderful insight, innate insight into demographic and cultural differences. So he's able to adjust his language and his tone really to meet the needs of the audience. So all of a sudden, we have a picture of what kind of communicator Andrew is. We get that he's persuasive. We get he's comfortable with large groups. We get a skill and a strength that he has specifically that makes him a great oral communicator, and that is that he reads his audience. He understands cultural differences. So this is a tough thing to do on your own. I highly recommend you do it with somebody. Ask a friend, a spouse. If you have a professional, great. And if worse comes to worse, do it in front of the mirror. Try another one. An individual, Chris, was applying for a job that was it was like a literary agent, but it was actually for a media company. So it was recognizing new books and movies and programming. And he said that he is just really innately great at recognizing creative talent. And the question is, what really made him different from the other applicants? You pretty much have to assume that anyone going after this position really believed they had an innate ability to recognize creative talent. So as Chris started to describe what made him really great at recognizing creative talent, he was describing how he was an information gatherer. Okay, what's an information gatherer? Well, he moved on to say, I'm a pop culture junkie. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I go out and experience the world. And he started describing how he goes to improvisation clubs, he even goes to comic book conventions. He joins forums and discussions on the hot new video games. So all of a sudden, he's given such depth and context to this skill. And we have an understanding of how this is a person who has his finger on the pulse. This is a person that understands what's up and coming. Let's try one more. Effective leader. That's pretty broad, and that comes up all the time. When you think of leaders, they're pretty diverse. So what do you mean by an effective leader? And Susan went through this exercise, and she started to describe that one of her greatest skills was how to motivate other people, that she had been in several different environments, some with wonderful, very effective managers who motivated her, and others that were just absolutely awful. And the awful experiences really helped her to understand what doesn't work. And she cultivated a style that she describes as empowering others so that they feel committed to their goals and to the team. And she described how she stays connected as a manager by having weekly meetings and an open door policy. So all of a sudden, again, we've got a clear idea of the kind of leader Susan is. So one of the key things as you go through this and you start to tell your story and you pull out what makes you different, what gives you depth, is you want to be able to connect it to the job. Know the job description well. Read it really closely. Note keywords and skills. You want to underline some words, highlight some words, whatever it is you can do to pull out the details of the job and take your strengths and wrap them back around. Don't hesitate to use the same language, words, tone, phrases. The best thing that can happen is if the interviewer says, wow, you're describing exactly what I want. And when you tell a story, make sure you've got a point. Tell the interviewer that, the story goes like this, and the point is, what I learned from this, the skill I cultivated is, don't assume that they know your point. And always wrap back your story to the goals, the mission, the objections, etc. of the company. Make that connection. So we've talked about clarity. Clarity of the organization, know the organization well, but also clarity about you, your skills and your strengths. And even more so, you want to be really clear on how you develop those strengths, what makes you different from others with those same strengths. And the next piece is reframing. So reframing is significant because you want to turn that negative self-talk into more empowering thoughts. And remember, disempowering thoughts make you feel disempowered, you act disempowered. So the negative self-talk is going on in your head. It's not conversation you're having with the interviewer, so keep that in mind. This is an exercise for you to reframe. How do you do that? How do you take a weakness that you see as a weakness? This may not be a weakness to anybody else, but I hear this one a lot. I'm too quiet. I don't have a seat at the table. I don't speak up. Well, let's reframe it. Take a look at, because you're quiet, because that is an innate trait of yours, what skill or trait have you developed? And it's as simple as saying, because I'm quiet, I'm good at, and fill in the blank. Try another one. I'm too aggressive. I hear this one a lot also. Well, that doesn't have to be a weakness. You're defining it as a weakness. You're seeing it as a weakness. So let's try reframing that. Again, because I'm aggressive, what have I gotten really good at? I've gotten great at negotiating. I've got a good at closing the deal. And this one comes up all the time these days. I'm too old. That doesn't have to be a weakness. That's in your mind. So if you are older than a lot of people applying for the job, that's a fact. How can you turn that around and make it into something more positive and empowering? Think of your life experiences. What has your life experiences led you to be really good at? Turn it around in your mind. So sometimes people ask about being overqualified. And being overqualified doesn't have to be a weakness. You want to reframe it. what does your qualifications and skill lend to this organization? What are your gifts that you're bringing? And reframe also the position. Is maybe it is a couple of steps down from what you're used to, but see it as a stepping stone. See it as your next path in life and reframe it rather than focusing on how negative it is that you potentially have to take a step back.
Sarah, some other people are asking about how about the perceived fear of that you've been out of the workforce for a while and you're trying to return to it?
Yeah, that's kind of the same feelings and experience that younger people have as they graduate. So that brainstorming exercise, step number 1, is really critical because you want to look at volunteering and life experiences and start qualifying them. And I'll give you an example. I'm actually working with somebody, she's in her early 20s, she's a recent grad, and she really has only had an internship in terms of a real organization, a work experience. And as we started to dig, she was explaining all her responsibilities as the president of her sorority. And as she started to talk and explained that she was involved in the marketing and this is what she did, coming up with ideas and creativity and strategy, then she went on to describe the whole recruiting process. And then she went on to talk about how she sits on the judiciary committee of the sorority. And all of a sudden, we were able to start dissecting what does she love, what is she good at. And in fact, what came out of it was recruiting. She really, really had an inspiring feeling about recruiting. She had never thought about that. She was sort of on the path to physical therapy. So you want to brainstorm with people who know you. You want to have the conversations, and you want to start pulling out those strengths and reframing in your mind really how qualified you are. So in terms of reframing, so we've done the clarity, we still have a little piece of reframing, and one of the most important things you can do is reframe how you see the interview. So many people dread the interview, and it really doesn't have to be that way. The interview is actually your chance to shine. It's your opportunity to come to life. And you want to remind yourself that this is your chance to share your strengths, to give the stories, to give the depth and the context to your strengths and qualities. But it's your chance to bring your resume to life. The resume doesn't show your personality, and the resume doesn't give context and depth. And always remember, if you've been asked for an interview, the fact of the matter is they're already interested in you. You've already shown some potential. So make sure you use this reframing tool for you. Remember, everything starts with a thought. You need to start with empowering thoughts and focus on your strengths. Always remember, your weaknesses are just in your mind, because every trait and quality you have is a gift. It's what you've done with it, what you've learned with those traits and qualities. The last piece of getting comfortable with the interviewing process, the clarity, the reframing, the next tool is really to acknowledge your fears. And the first thing you can do is literally ask yourself, what questions do I fear most? We all have them. And Martha was a person who really thought she interviewed incredibly well, and she found herself somewhere in the middle of the interview just losing her confidence. She didn't know why. After some probing, what she figured out was that any single time she got asked a question about her old job or her boss, she just kind of spiraled into this insecure place. So you want to recognize those questions that kind of throw you off balance, and you want to come up with an answer. You want to recognize, what do you feel confident about sharing? Come from a place of certainty and believe in your answer. So I'll give you the example with Martha. As she really told her story, and again, you want to try to do this out loud to somebody, she started to describe how she'd been at the company for many years. She had been promoted a couple of times, and this last promotion was the most challenging. And she described how she was working with somebody who had a very different personality type. And at the beginning, she said it worked. We bounced off of each other's strengths. But in the long run, she said she welcomed the differences and the other individual didn't. And she realized that her growth potential was really stunted in this environment. So all of a sudden, she's turned what could be a very negative story into something empowering and positive. We get the sense that she's got longevity at a company, which is loyalty and commitment. We get the sense that she's obviously highly qualified because she's been promoted. We get an understanding of her that she's willing to work with people who are different. And she then felt confident and clear in her answer. And that's what you want. The clearer you are in your answer, the more confident you're going to be. Recognize those sabotaging stories. We all tell them to ourselves. They go over and over again. I'm too old, I'm too old. But you've got a story that generally goes with it. You've got that story about, where you didn't do well in school. Recognize it, acknowledge it. And really, most importantly, is envision your confident self in the job. Take the time to sit on a lounge chair outside or sit on a couch and close your eyes. Go through all 5 of your senses. See yourself in the job. Recognize the noises, the environment. See the impact you have. Feel the impact. Imagine your success. This is your confident self. If you don't see yourself, they won't see you. Ultimately, be clear. That clarity leads you to the confidence. And be authentic. Be your true self. The moment you try to give an answer that you think they want to hear, you've already lost your sense of self. You've started spiraling into that insecure place. Now you have a tool, hopefully, to pull yourself back to center. Recognize physically where that insecurity shows up. Consciously change your thought. Always remember, everything starts with a thought. So shift your thought. Focus on your purpose. Focus on what you know for sure. That's where the authenticity comes in. And I love this quote by Oscar Wilde. Be yourself because everyone else is taking. Be proud of yourself. Recognize that every quality and strength that you have, every trait that you have, is a gift to the outside world. It's how you see it. And when you're applying for a job, know in that deep place of knowing that you're worthy of the job. That's it. Hello?
Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
I was just picking in, listening, looking at some chats of everything that you have gone through, and had a couple of questions coming in, and just a couple of my comments. A couple of people wanting clarification about so that, when you were going over how to sort of take your strengths and when you were delving deep, and how you relate that to the job, that you were just wanted to, clarify. You're talking about how they should take some of their achievements and strengths and help link it to the organization.
Right. So a good example is Susan, who was that empowering communicator. You got a feel for the kind of leader she was in working with a team. She obviously has a more casual form of leadership. You need to know what kind of leader that company's looking for. Again, you're going to get that from the job description, probably the HR person. If they want somebody who can manage, from top down and be a very powerful, strong leader, all of a sudden, Susan has not connected herself to the job. So make sure as you recognize your story, your strength, that it's connecting back. You want to know what kind of leader they're looking for. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, some of the questions are coming in with reviewing. I think if you go to the next slide about the top 10 interviewing tips, that might help
right.
with some of the questions coming in.
I'm sorry, I totally forgot that. Oh, boy. Okay, top 10 interviewing tips. Get clear. Know that essentially you are selling yourself. And I tell people sometimes, literally go to a magazine that you like and rip out an ad that grabs your attention. How did they get you to buy that golf club or that mascara? Recognize the simplicity in knowing what the consumer wants. So the more you know that they want, the more you can shape your stories, your context into the job description. Articulate with the depth and the context. That is really significant for making your strengths into unique strengths. Turn your weaknesses into strengths. Make sure you reframe. All your weaknesses are in your head. They lead to some kind of a strength that you've developed. Of course, identify those questions you fear. If you acknowledge them, you're aware of them, you are going to fear them less. And if you come up with an answer that comes from a place of certainty, you will tackle that fear head on. When you give examples, make sure you state your point. You have to realize that the interviewer doesn't always know your point. And maybe they're thinking of some other point. I always say circle back around. Tell the story, circle back around and make the point. Know that it's okay to pause and to ask for clarification. Have a vision. And most of all, be yourself. Be yourself because that is what you've got. You need to be proud of what you're selling. You cannot be somebody else and pretend to have something else. Be proud of what you've got and communicate it with clarity and confidence.
So a lot of this, too, is find someone to practice. Find a way to get comfortable in a safe place to do the hard interview questions.
So ultimately, to wrap things up, to give you a sense of where you've come from, you start with the personal empowerment, the clarity, the confidence, the commitment. That personal empowerment helps you in any situation in life. You're talking to a boss, you're talking to an employee, you're talking to a team of people, you're talking to a friend or significant other. The clearer you are, the more confident you become, and you allow yourself to focus on what you really want to achieve rather than having the emotions steer your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And always remember, everything starts with a thought. So the minute you recognize that you have disempowering thoughts, ineffective thoughts, shift your thinking. Have a different thought. Turn it around so it's a more empowering thought. And believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, make a commitment. If you make a verbal commitment to yourself to hold your purpose higher, you will be 65% more likely to stick to that commitment if you say it out loud. And if you write it down, the percentage goes up. But take a moment to verbally commit to yourself what your purpose is for a particular meeting or conversation. And again, if you don't have the time to prep and you're in the moment, go back to that place of what do I know for sure. Focus on anything you know for sure. It's authentic and it's your place of confidence. So thank you.
Do you have any final tips for what someone should do when they're interviewing, Sarah?
Before your interview, practice. Practice in front of a mirror, and you can't anticipate exactly what questions. Practice knowing yourself. Have other people. I really recommend you do all these exercises with somebody listening to you, and ask somebody to probe a little deeper. And I always come back to clarity. Be clear. Be clear on what you're selling. Be clear on who you are. Be clear on how you develop these skills and these strengths. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we wanted to be sure that got mentioned before we go to questions was just some follow-up, because some of the feedback we get, especially through Brunette or through alums who come and talk at groups and events, is just to be, the most important thing is people like to be recognized. They like the follow-up. And these are some of the just final things to always remember. I have a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Heather, did you just take control of the
slides?
Oh.
Okay. So we can move on to the question portion, I think. One of the questions that has come in is handling the question of greatest weaknesses when you were talking about trying to reframe that.
Yeah. Well, that is definitely a question that most people fear. And again, it's getting clear, but the most important thing is to recognize what you've learned, how you've grown, how you handle it. Um, I, I had a guy who was applying for a professorial position, and that is a question that always tripped him up. And he said that one of the greatest issues for him is when a student stands up and kind of challenges him. Right in front of everyone else. He just really backed away from conflict. And what he came to recognize is the way to handle it was to send the question back to the audience, the class, and develop into a conversation rather than him being on the spot where he felt insecure, he clammed up. And he was able to describe how one of his weaknesses is he does not love conflict. But here's how he dealt with it. Here's what he's learned. He's learned to make it productive. He's learned to make it effective. And he's learned to take something that is clearly not a comfort zone for him and make it into a more effective situation for his class. So you want to focus on what you've learned, how you've developed ways to deal with that weakness, and how you've grown.
Another great question that's come in, it was just about the slide we just had, was thank you notes. Is an email thank you note enough? What's sort of the protocol for that? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I recommend that you ask the interviewer what is the best way to communicate with you. Do you prefer email or do you prefer hard copies? And get a sense of what works for them.
Okay, that's a great way to do it.
I was going to say another thing that comes up often is what's the difference between behavioral interviewing and actual interviewing. So let me take a moment to explain that. Behavioral interviewing is when the interviewer really wants to get a sense of who you are, how you make decisions. Are you a self-starter? How do you deal with difficult situations? Are you willing to learn? Are you adaptable? So all of these exercises that you're going through to give depth and context to your skills and your strengths is really going to be very helpful for behavioral interviewing, because as you can describe how you got to a place of strength, you are showing them how you've grown, how you think, how you handle situations. And behavioral interviewing, they often don't actually ask you a question. They say, tell me a time when, describe a situation when. And what you want to focus on is literally describing the situation. Be very clear, what is the issue? And then recognize what actions and tasks and steps you took to solve the issue, to deal with the problem. And then tie it back to the results. What's the positive outcome? So situation, actionable steps that you took, and then the outcome. I hope that helps, because behavioral interviewing seems to be very popular these days. Yeah. I'm all in favor of it. I think it gives a much better picture of who you are.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. One of the things that's popular nowadays, too, is Skype interviews or video conference interviews. Do you have any tips about that?
Acknowledge that you're nervous about Skype if you are. Skype has sort of weird angles, and in fact, I don't use it for any of my telephone coaching, because you look up at the camera, there are distractions in the background. It's weird. If you're going to do a Skype interview, practice. Get on Skype and practice, because it is definitely a different feel than in person or telephone.
Yeah, practice, practice, practice sounds like a good answer there. One other question is, talk a little bit about informational interviews and how that's a little different, and maybe some tactics for handling that.
Yeah, I'm always going to go back to clarity, which is be clear on your purpose for the interview and reframe it. It's not necessarily an interview. It's an exploratory conversation. You are going in there to explore something. Focus on what your purpose is. Is your purpose to learn more about the particular person's industry? Is your purpose to get an introduction to so-and-so? Is your purpose to ask them what you can do to improve a particular skill that you know they're good at? Get really clear on what your purpose is and reframe it as an exploratory opportunity. But always remember that first impressions are important. So you want to handle even informational interviews with clarity and confidence.
Okay. There are a couple more coming through, but some of them we might have to address individually, and I think you've covered a lot of great information here. One of the things that, there's always going to be more and more and a lot of personal things in terms of how I would answer that question. And at least from our side, we have tried to provide some tools under our umbrella of the Career Navigator that could also help people if you continue to have questions. It is how the coaching process came about for us. We wanted to cover the 4 main components of career development: assessment, research, having a job board, and networking. So through assessment, we have our coaching program. We also have an online tool that is a nice way for you to evaluate your skills and strengths and to at least get a start with some goal setting and knowing some of the questions to ask. We want to help you with the research process. How do you learn more about the company? How do you learn more about culture and location and what's available close to me and what do the jobs look like and who might be some contacts there? So our career search tool is a way to help you with that. And then once you maybe have a little bit more clarity with where you want to go, you can use our job board. We have over 600 jobs right now posted. New jobs come in and go away every day. It's a great way as an alum that you could post the positions you know about to your fellow alumni, so I would encourage you to do that. It's also a nice way, even if you don't see a job that's right for you, to see. You can view the employer list of employers who are posting with us. You can look at the contacts list and see if there's an alum who you know who might be a good contact. You can look at the job descriptions just to see what is the language people are using, what are the words, what are the skills that they're asking for. And Brown is a great network for you. You have a very special network that's set up for you through Brunette. And the attractiveness is that this is a list of people who have said, we want to help, we are here, and they have an extra level of commonality with you. And of course, Brown has many LinkedIn groups. Our General Brown Alumni Group has over 10,000 members, I think. To date, it changes daily, so I can't always keep up with the exact number. But there's also several, individual industry groups as well. So lots of resources available that you could use. We really appreciate Sarah being with us today. If you want to contact her, have any information, here's her contact information. Please feel free to copy that. People are asking about getting the slides because there's so many and because, Sarah's worked really hard on this. You can view the slides as many times as you want once it is put up on our website. It will be, we announce when it's up there on Facebook or Twitter, but you can also just check the website if those aren't tools that you like to use as well. And if you have any other questions about our tools, feel free to contact our director, Eve Ornstead, or my colleague, Donna Curry, or myself, and we will try and be helpful to you. So thank you for joining our webinar today. This is going to wrap up this season, but we plan to start again with some great experts in the fall, so watch for that. And Sarah, I really appreciate you being with us. Is there any last words you'd like to offer?
I just want to tell everyone to really just know that you're worthy of whatever job you're going after. Focus on those strengths, shift your thinking, and it makes such a tremendous difference for the interviewing process and in any area of your life if you just focus on what you know for sure and get clear. Clarity, clarity, clarity. That's my final word. So good luck to everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.